I want to welcome you to another episode of Foresight TV. You probably can't see too much because we don't have very much of the screen, but I'm actually broadcasting to you from a hotel in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I'm on vacation this week. Almost had a guest host do this, but when I started thinking about this opportunity to talk to Joel and Bill Thomas at Lifesprk about what they're doing to change the world of senior living, I could not miss out. And so I've got my all bags are all packed, ready to go off to my next destination. So, Joel, Bill, I can hardly wait to dig into what you're going to do to make senior living more amazing than it is. But first, we are going to play this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Well, let's dig into senior living. Joel, let's actually start with you and have you talk a little bit about Lifesprk, who Lifesprk is, and kind of what your big dream is.
Sure. So first, Lifesprk and myself. I'm a nurse by background. Just to give you a quick run, I got into senior services back about 30 years ago. Really grew up in the home and community, a lot of the home care side of the space, and then as times evolved, obviously really opened that up to really focus on the senior directly versus any sort of payer or our environment or disease. Really try to go full circle and full gamut on how do we really think about these journeys for these seniors over time? And so that really was what Lifesprk was birthed out of, was the sense of how do we think completely differently in redesigning the experience in the second half or third half, or lots of people use different words and different lingo in that, but really that kind of that holistic longitudinal life. And so Lifesprk started out with geriatric care management and holistically with pay. Then we got into a bunch of assisted living buildings, Steve, where we learned about assisted living and what it was like and how to do it differently and better. Then we got into the hospitals, and then we got into TCUs, and then we got into hospice and palliative care. Then we got into a medical practice where we started our own medical practice, all with the idea of how do you really make the big pivot, the big change. And what we've learned over the last year to kind of wrap this up is we've obviously started and built a lot of architecture around senior services and senior capabilities, both on the medical side as well as on the social determinant side. But as it relates to where we're going and what's really exciting is that we've learned, and what we've pivoted to is that we know that we can not only change the experience for folks, but really do it from a way of really accessing all of their assets. What I mean by that is people think of senior housing and senior living a lot of times in the assisted living and out of pocket, or sometimes some waivered services. But we've really dunked into where we can really make that pivot is grab those Medicare dollars and really put that into the source pool to create a better platform, company, which is what Lifesprk is, an alternative delivery system, if you will, to serve seniors holistically, longitudinally with tech. So that's a quick spin on where we're at. And obviously, I think and most people know, we've done a lot of acquiring of different senior housing, property management, and it's just one big piece of the architecture to make change across the whole continuum.
So, Bill, you're probably one of the best known people in the industry, but in case somebody just stumbled across this for the first time, talk a little bit about who you are and what you're doing with Lifesprk.
Well, I'm a geriatrician. So, Joel brought up his background in nursing. I come out of the field of medicine and very happy and proud to have many years in practice. And through it all, like Joel, I found that the systems we were establishing to support older people were not working as well as we'd hope, and that there was a need for new models. So for people who are not familiar with my work, I developed the Eden alternative model and the greenhouse model and the senior ER model, and now actually working with Joel, the Spark model, which you're going to be hearing a lot more about. But, it's it's about taking a system level approach to making things better rather than a purely individual approach. I think that's why I'm with Lifesprk, is that it's a system level company wanting to make system level changes.
I'm reading a book sort of about Edward Deming and his thinking on systems. Old book, and I think there's so much new material coming out on leadership every year that you sort of wonder, can you learn anything from a book that was written 30 years ago, and really ideas that were birthed in the 1950s, so 70 years ago. But it's all about systems, and the point they make is when employees screw up, it's not, mostly people want to do a good job, and it's because the system's broken. So let's dig into the system. And Joel, you want to start? Bill, you want to start?
Yeah, I'd like to say something about that. Senior living, the industry has a lot of virtues, and I have a lot of friends there, and a lot of people doing a good job, and especially what they did getting us through COVID. Okay, so you have to put that right on the table. At the same time, the original sin of senior living that has never been rectified is they put the place ahead of the person. They have this place, and they then try to figure out how people fit into the place. And I'll throw it back over to Joel, but what attracted me to working with Lifesprk is that it started, as Joel said in the opening, it really started with, well, let's put the person first and we'll worry about the place later. I mean, there's lots of places. And you talk about making system level change. That's the flip. Person first, place second. I mean, Joel, what do you want to say about that?
Yeah, I love that Steve talked about Deming, because I love that, survival is not mandatory. That's one of his obviously famous quotes. And I think when we think about assisted living or any of our own little pet, our sacred cows, survival is not mandatory. And then I think from a systems perspective, obviously the Sentinel book that you were a part of, Bill, but Atul Gawande's Being Mortal was all about, the system. Steve, as you're well aware, I'm sure you read that book. But, I guess, from that perspective, just a little bit more on that is it always has been about that, right? And again, I think that system has to go. And we built our, sick care system. I don't call it a healthcare system at all. I call it a sick care system because it is a sick care system. It's an acute reactive system of healthcare. We built that all based on the payment of keeping people sick, and we mostly get paid when we keep people sick. And to create this longitudinal system, Steve, right? I mean, it's that holistic approach, right? It's that person-centered approach, as Bill said, and that's really what Lifesprk and myself and many of us now, as we think about the future and the opportunity in senior living and beyond, is really, how do we do true population health? How do we really lower costs for these folks and use those resources, as I said, both on the out-of-pocket as well as on the family, as well as on the institutional or the government side, much, much better to create that ecosystem that is truly a system, including family and community.
So I'm going to use myself. I'm 66 years old. I got a couple years before I'm ready to even think about what at least traditional senior living looks like, right? Mm-hmm. But I find myself thinking that as I'm 66 years old and I'm fairly new to the community where I live, I found coming in, without having kids, making new friends and relationships was much, much tougher. And that's even inside a church context, which tends to be one of the places where people do that. So, but the idea of me going into senior living scares me because one of the things I know, and I was just talking to somebody who's a resident who said I would have never moved in if I understood that when I moved into my senior living community, I was going to become a second-class citizen in the eyes of the people who were operating it.
Yeah.
How do we get beyond that?
Okay, so first thing is we take a great big sledgehammer and we smash the term senior living, okay? The reason we do is because these are homes and they are communities. And we apply all of the best practices, the ethos, and the um, metrics of how do you take care of people at home. It's just that these people living at home live in this kind of building, and it's kind of a cool building, and it's got some real advantages, honestly. And I'm just going to say, I notice in the comments that John Cochran made a comment, and there's somebody who I think has the right idea, that this is really a home and community-based business, that we orient ourselves away from real estate first, and we put ourselves into a person first a position. And then the second thing I'll say is a lot of senior living has been oriented around private pay, out of pocket, which is great. And something I picked up from Joel was this idea that we're entering a world where every wallet has two sides. There's that private pay money that you have side, and there are all these earned benefits that creative people can help you access, and there are new ways of getting access to those benefits to help you live where you want and how you want, and that's really what matters. That's the most important thing, in my opinion.
So when do I, as somebody who's growing older, when do I become part of the Lifesprk system, and what does that look like? I mean, because traditionally what would happen is I wait until I have some acute thing. My family panics because they can't take care of me and I can't live at home, and they go out and find the senior living community that makes them feel least guilty that they put me in, right?
Yeah.
Joel, hit them.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's that again. We look this far in front of our noses, or whatever they say, and then we go from silo to silo to silo to silo to silo as they meet
exactly
with different people, different EMRs, all sorts of transition and loss, all sorts of heartache and just a challenge and mess. So the answer, Steve, is really, as we're building out Lifesprk, we're really building a life style and a life services, not care, life services business to educate and keep people aware of their options as they go forward, truly. And a lot of that is technology and lightweight, and a lot of it's, people have tried before with, the consumer side of educating seniors on advanced care planning and lifestyle and food and love and care and, all these things, right? Like an AARP-ish kind of thing, like Life Reimagined was trying to be for a while. So it's the idea of coming upstream and learning and being empowered as you are able to make the best choices in your life. That's where we want to meet you, right? And so you can know, because a lot of people don't put in the time to learn about what their options are until it's really an acute, and then they're looking down a straw as far as a few options versus many. So you get with Lifesprk as a partner, as a trusted advisor early, and we would help you through that. And one thing I would say specifically about that, for instance, Lifesprk has gone at global risk with Medicare Advantage population, Steve. So we're going at global risk. So we're working with the payers now on global populations of fully stratified. So we have 65-year-olds that are out golfing and doing stuff, and we're at risk for their total medical spend, quite frankly. And so we're actually working at ways to engage them, to add value, to create relevance, curating content, as well as, as they flow through their journey, right? And obviously, hopefully keeping them off that roller coaster of crisis, but into a more thoughtful approach. We're always there. So it's really about that, again, that longitudinal trusted relationship. And that's what Lifesprk really wants to become and earn as a provider, is not just another hospice or late life or physician service or nursing service or housing service or home care service or whatever. But really, it's more about not the services, as Bill said. What about the person? Let's make sure that journey is the sacred cow.
So it sounds so great. How do you make this happen? I mean, I just think that it's so complicated. Bob Kramer and Ann Tomlinson and who's the third person? David Grabowski had an article on the Hill where they talked about how tough it is. And I don't know whether you've ever gone to consume as a consumer of senior living, but let me tell you what, as an expert who went and did it, I learned I wasn't very much of an expert. I mean, it's really tough.
Yeah, you've got to, you talk about that, what Ann and Bob were talking about, and David in that op-ed, what they were really saying is the infrastructure we have built over the past century is organized around custodianship of acute illnesses and injuries, and we need a new infrastructure. So this is what we're Joel and I and the whole team, what we're all committed to, is actually building a complete new delivery system that isn't founded on the concept of the all-powerful doctor in the shiny hospital tower. That it doesn't revolve around that, which is what the system we have today was organized to do. And instead, it's in some ways, maybe it's like less glamorous, but we revolve around the person. So, Steve, you probably are on Medicare, aren't you?
I am. Yep.
Okay, great. So the answer to your earlier question is, what are your options for getting into a flavor of Medicare that gives you more flexibility and more choices? That's the question. And it's actually not easy because not every community has a Lifesprk with this integrated approach. So that's our job, is to try to bring that to a national scale.
So sell me Lifesprk. I mean, this to me, it sounds like a dumb question, but I think this is actually really an important question. So my annual renewal for my Medicare supplement is coming up, right? And I've got like just about a zillion choices coming at me of things that everybody's telling me all the free stuff they're going to do. Mm-hmm. What is your sales pitch that I should become part of the Lifesprk version of Medicare Advantage, technically? So.
Yeah, you want to go, Bill, or you want me to go?
You hit. No, it's your turn.
Okay, it's my turn. Good. Well, here's the sell. So it's different to different cohorts, right, Steve? For you, I would say, look, what we are offering is that integrated system where we're going to be your trusted advisor, and we're going to serve you wherever your best place of service is. And what I mean by that is, if you have you need a telehealth visit, we'll do it. If you need, if you have an acute event, we'll take care of you at home. We'll take care of you in a facility. If you want to go to the hospital, we'll go there. But we're going to follow you around. First of all, what your goals and wishes are as you think about your last part of the journey of life, as well as the medical side. So it's the social determinant side and the medical side. We're going to do that, as Bill said, all within the construct of maximizing your benefits, your earned benefits, as well as, not trying to dip into your out of pocket as much, but really we're going to maximize within the sick care system those benefits to your best advantage. And so I know somebody was tipping through the comments as well, but even things like that we haven't talked about for a while. Everybody has heard of PACE, and everybody likes to talk about different models like all-inclusive care models. But I really truly believe that, housing, food insecurities, all these types of things. When you spend $3.5 trillion on sick care, when we spend 2 times more than any first world country on sick care, I mean, are you kidding me? We can't do better, to your point when we started this, Steve. I mean, we can't do better. There's so much money flopping around that's being wasted in these acute care events that as a consumer, as yourself, we together can do better and use that money for your life and what you care about with your purpose, passion, identity, not just on your next decubitus ulcer and your CDK services and your, diabetic neuropathy. You know what I mean? So it's like, we got to get to the life part. And that's really where I would push you. Is it's a different delivery system that's built around you.
Yeah. And I'd like to jump in on this, Steve, because I know for a long time you've cultivated a not very knowledgeable audience. One reason I love coming on with you, but the thing we're starting to realize is that the established healthcare system's commitment to the illusion of a continuum of care is actually doing a lot of damage. And what happens when you take the perspective of the person, not the perspective of the CEO with the PowerPoint and look at all our segments of care and they're all connected. When you're the person, you realize that the current system takes care of you, and then you exit that segment of care, and then you're in a terrifying gap. between that segment of care and I don't know, whatever the next segment of care is. And it's up to you and your family to negotiate through that gap. Also, information about you leaks into the gap and is lost. So what we're saying is we don't want a continuum of care. We want a relationship, and that the relationship is whole, not based on, well, I took care of you in the ER and now you're going to the orthopedic clinic and then you're going here and then you're going there. The idea is that if you're with the person all the way, they don't get lost in the gaps. And you said at the beginning, Steve, what it's like to be a consumer in this arena. It's the gaps that kill people and that throw people off track and that create, terrible carnage in our system.
Well, and I think the other challenge, and that I've been thinking about this a lot over the last few weeks, is quality of life. In my particular religious world, we have people who live much longer than average, and we have elevated, good, healthy eating and lifestyle habits. But sometimes when I look at these people who are in their late 80s and 90s and even to 100, I feel like they're mostly gotten old just so they can wait until they longer to die. And I'm not sure there's much quality of life. And even as, you talk about these episodes with gaps, what I think happens is they become dips as you get older, right? So people get sick and then they have an acute episode and they get back better. But how do we where does quality of life as opposed to just extending life fit into all of this? Long way of asking a short question.
Yeah, I would jump on that one quick. So I think it's back to what you were talking about before and what we've been talking about already so far is that relationship, Steve, right? No one has, we've stripped out sort of some of these sage wisdom overseers. We used to have family practice. We used to have close-knit families that lived down the street, like in Mayberry, and the adult daughters used to be there, and community and by the fire. And, some of that socioeconomically is stripped away, right? And so people are at a loss, and plus people are living way longer, and people are geographically spread all over the country, and all these things that have just happened, right? By just happening. And so where that comes back together for me anyway is in that trusting relationship, right? We have to have that go-to person that really knows me. Somebody needs to know me and somebody needs to help me contemplate these questions, right? What is my late life plan? To your point, like, do I want these things? Do I, these get into somewhat more specific when you start talking about pulse.
No, they're coming back. Keep talking.
Yeah, but the thing is that, that's where I think not only as it relates to some of that ethical and kind of longevity in life and how long and what's quality and what's not quality. Those are all just questions I think that are personal to each, but we definitely have to have somebody that can have that dialogue and exchange and have competent answers and competent places to go and look and do it from a vulnerable and humanity perspective. So I think that's where it's missing a lot of times. There's so many lonely people with so many questions and nobody to ask, and they can't in a book, and you can't just pick it up because you have to look at that that totality, that holistic nature of what is going on. What are my goals? What are my perspectives and passions? And again, that's where Lifesprk's trying to play that, not just that doctor role, not just that adult daughter role, but really that trusted advisor that has a lot of expertise in geriatric services across the continuum.
Well, so I want to actually pop up this comment. I hope it doesn't completely obliterate it from John Cochran, but so I won't leave it up very long because it hides most of our faces. But this is a really good question. Do we need to change the consumer orientation? I think that this idea that we have so indoctrinated sick care that we don't approach it in a very healthy way, if you will, right? So and yet, I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty fortunate because both my parents lived to, late 80s. My dad's still alive at 93. So I get some sort of a model. But the truth is that most of us we don't know how to do this because it hasn't been done before. And I need you to be part doctor, part health advisor, and part psychologist to help me with this, right?
So I actually will jump in on this because I've been working on this with Joel over the last year. So, as I said at the top of the program, that we really work hard to be clear about what we're trying to do. So I've developed this 4-book series, and if you just look at the titles of the books, you're going to get a capsule of what we're trying to do. And to John's comment, these titles of these books are how we are orienting ourselves in a different position than the acute care, sick care system. So the first book is called Aging Magnificently. And it just puts it out there that, what this part of life, let's do it magnificently. Let's not just manage decline. Let's just not deal with disability. Let's age magnificently. It's very aspirational, which is what I think we need. The second book in the series is called The Good Life. And I was on with some team members at Lifesprk yesterday. We were talking about what business we're in. And at the end, we kind of said, actually, this is the business we're in, the good life. That's what we're oriented toward. And the reason is, in order to have the good life, that medical stuff has to be taken care of really well. But the medical stuff isn't the good life. And back to John's comment, that's where we went off the rails. So the third book in the series is called MESH, which stands for Move, Eat, Sleep, Heal. And that's just what you were saying earlier, Steve. It's the simple things. Do the simple things well. Get the support you need to do the simple things well. So life is better. And then the last book in the series is called Better Together. And that really addresses our need for belonging and our need to be connected. And Joel and I are developing an approach to this called the Lifesprk Lodge, which is really about fostering purposeful, meaningful belonging in a world where too many people lack access to that. So those 4 books, I think, in a way, kind of crystallize our stance relative to the sick care system. Joel, you were going to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in there. One thing that kind of goes off of everything that you said, Bill, and then I think, Steve, one thing that we haven't talked a lot about is data analytics and really kind of what that means and how to use that and why that's so important, right? In this sphere of kind of ambiguity and question. And I love John's points too. And I was just rethinking as you guys were talking, but really when it boils down to the Lifesprk perspective there, you can't do it without payment reform, right? I just want to throw that out a bit, right? I mean, we all been trying to do lots of stuff for lots of years. We become victims. We're all victims. We can't do it in senior housing because there's no money and there's no reimbursement and all this stuff. The big change with the ACA and with true risk-based and again ultimately to population health is the way if you're bold enough, right now we can say, you know what? Healthcare, it matters, like Bill said, but it really doesn't matter because what drives most of people's behavior and most of the outcomes is the non-healthcare. 80% of all outcomes in life are derived from behavior, right? Not from the medical, my DNA. So when you, for me, after doing this for so long and feeling like I'm always a victim, like everybody else out there, many times. I said, enough's enough. Until we get to the money equation and actually demonstrate with the data and analytics, and that's where I was going, that, keep somebody happy, right? And we think it's silly. We're like, oh, it's happy, or they're nutritionally balanced, or they have, a purpose, or, whatever these variables are, we can measure them now, and we can demonstrate that by keeping those high, if you will, just as a high, that actually derives better outcomes and better population health, which is lower cost and improve the community and improve the experience on Net Promoter Score. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that into the mix that this also is a new world, right? The new world isn't the old world as far as technology, data, analytics, capability, machine learning, AI. And again, it's our jobs, all of us on this phone, is to prove that what we're doing, regardless of what we're doing, right? We can lift weights, or we can do food, or we can do this. We do all these bit plays, but really it's not about one play. It's about all of them and how do they drive the economic engine and how do they drive the life experience equation. And so that's, to me, I just wanted to get that out in the middle because this is a new day for all of us. And again, it's new because people are like, I don't know about managed care. I don't know about Medicare Advantage. I don't know about D-SNPs and I-SNPs and direct contracting and all this. But we better, because that's the way for us to get home with these value propositions and change the world.
So I got so many places I'd like to go. I'm going to take a little detour because it's kind of a soapbox issue to me. We know there's so much data out there that suggests when people are living happy, fulfilled lives, they stay healthier longer and they demand less services from their senior living communities. And yet, for all of that, we continue to hire high school graduates to run life enrichment programs for people who have bachelor's, master's, and PhD programs. Low-hanging fruit. I think that the leader, life enrichment person ought to be the most highest paid person on any given campus, and it just pisses me off that this low-hanging fruit doesn't there. And so I'm going to throw that challenge to you, Joel.
Well, yeah, and I'll let Bill jump on this too, but it's exactly what I just said, right? If we don't connect the value equation, Steve, with what we believe, it creates this huge gap, right? Of this victim, right? I'm a victim. It's, it should be. My God, right. The data. But guess what? Money makes the world go round. Money. And unfortunately, we hate it because none of us like to come from that context. But we have to prove it's not about money. It's about efficacy. It's about proving the value creation and using those dollars, pulling those dollars out of the acute care, sick, crappy, old garbage system. Yes. Sucking them back out and putting them to your life enrichment, putting them to activities, putting them to music, putting them to arts, putting them to passions. That's what we all care about. That's what we all want to. But again, until we do it, we can't just say, yeah, the arts are the best. Look at the research paper that Molly did or that Billy Bob did. Who gives a crap? The thing is, until we drive that into the unfortunate world of the capital American world that we live in, we are going to just keep being victims. So now, and why I'm saying why this is so opportunistic to your point, Steve, we can do that if we're smart, if we're doing it and we connect the dots and we go back with a sledgehammer instead of going back there and say, oh, please, you mighty, towers of influence with all the gold, please give me some because I have a great program for you to invest in. No, that's not going to work. So that's my answer to that. I agree with you. Let's do it now.
So I think that, so I want to say one thing about money. I hear all the time, for-profits are good, not-for-profits are wonderful, for-profits are terrible. I think in both cases, neither one of them has any idea how much money they could make. They could make way more. They're leaving hundreds of millions of dollars a year on the table right now today because they don't have a vision for doing it great. The vision is to keep costs under control rather than to create something amazing. Now I'm going to shift gears on that this sounds totally contradictory. So we're talking about stuff for rich people, right? Or how do we serve that middle market group? What do you do with poor people? All that stuff in Lifesprk world.
I'll let you, Bill, I want to jump in that. You go ahead. I'm just going to say that Joel was saying right there, we're used to looking at one side of the wallet.
Yeah.
Lifesprk looks at both sides of the wallet. That turns out to be greatly to the advantage of middle income people. Joel?
Yeah, and I would just say, see, this is again, Steve, where a lot of people don't understand how the world goes around because it's been cloaked in secrecy. And how the money flows in and out of these value-based arrangements is secrecy. And so until you get under the nest of that, you don't understand. But what I would say is this, is that, that, for instance, here's a great example. For us, if we go in a value-based contract with a dual eligible population, there's 3 times the money in the nest to start with, because obviously they spend more money when they're not getting the types of other advantages of other folks. They don't have out-of-pocket expenditures. So they're 3 times more valuable as far as a value-based contract than a original Medicare. You get 3 times more money, right, as a pool. So as an example, Lifesprk, again, Bill said this, I said this, we're agnostic to payer. I want K-Care, I want MA, I want any payer. I don't care who pays us, right? As long as we're creating value. But this is for this opportunity now in value-based architecture in the world we live in with 20% GDP on healthcare. Come on, man. I mean, this is crazy, especially with these senior populations that are not managed well, and they're just hitting the ER all the time. They're pinging your point about the roller coaster or the acute care settings. And so our opportunity is to take that benefit, right? That Medicaid benefit, just as well. I'd rather take a Medicaid than I would have Medicare, Steve, as far as the dollar. Yeah, seriously. there's more opportunity there.
There is.
There's more room in the delivery system. Again, people just don't understand how the money flows, but the money is there. We just have to start to really sniff a lot harder and get a little more aggressive on how we become not just a housing or not just a for-profit, out-of-pocket, nonprofit, out-of-pocket, but really understand how to abate sickness and how to get on the right side of healthcare, which is we need to keep people well, right? We need to have them doing the stuff that they care about, not about the stuff that they don't.
Well, and this is so right. So John Cochran asked, how do we serve the 8,000 people in our affordable communities, spending a fortune on reactive healthcare? And it is just insanity. We could change, with a little bit more payer flexibility, we could save the government, I don't know, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars every damn year. And it just pisses me off.
That's why we're on this phone call today, Steve, because that's what Lifesprk's doing. We are harvesting the value we've created. And again, I love John's comment, and he's right. The thing is, you have to get to the apex predator, which is the payer. If you don't get to the payment, you're screwed. You're always in the back seat. You're always wagging the tail. You're never up on the food chain getting the value that you creating. So it's all about value. It's not about money per se, but it's about value. And I love that. And I would, this is the kind of stuff we're taking these populations that he's talking about here, and we're flipping them on their ear, and we're going right to the payer, or we're a direct contracting entity. And I don't know how many people understand what that is, but that's a direct contract with Medicare to actually take full risk for these populations. So it's available to us today. We just have to go and get it. And
I get why they're doing that. The senior living industry right now is really pushing on Congress to provide more funding, particularly for nursing home for frontline caregivers. And we need it. I mean, what's happened with them is terrible, but it still makes us beholden rather than it doesn't make us the answer to the question. And that's the part that I'm really worried about. And you're talking about being the answer to the problem.
Yes, Bill, go ahead. But yeah, absolutely. And that's the opportunity. That's what we're talking about here. That is the global. This is not die by 1,000 slices, another little innovation like, hey, we got this new idea, Steve, about senior housing. This is like Bill said, sledgehammer, break it, restart it, build it, let's go. And again, the money's there. The opportunities are starting to be there. Again, it's not easy. Don't get me wrong, man. I've got more scars on my back than anybody probably. I've faced a lot of dragons, but you know what? If you're persistent and you're committed, we're getting home now. I mean, that's why, we're actually going to have, I think, another 10 or 20,000 lives that are going to come into our system here in the next probably 60 days. So it's just the right time to start happening. This is the right conversation.
Cool. Bill, I'm going to give you one more last word. We're pushing way past the time that I'm supposed to stop at. This is so good. I got some ideas about how we can maybe move this forward too that we'll talk about after all. But Bill, last word.
I would say it's time to march.
Yep. Perfect. Bill, Joel, thank you very much. Hang out with me here. And for those of you watching, thank you much. Thank you for all the comments. What I loved about the comments is your passion to fix this and make it better for each of you it just comes flowing through those comments. And I thank you for that, because it's that passion that will drive change. So have a great weekend, and I'll see you next Friday at Foresight TV.
Thanks, everybody.